Today I want to talk to you a little bit about formal and informal language. Let's get started. Okay, what is the difference between formal and informal language? Well, the first thing that you need to know is that informal and formal language serve different purposes, and this means that formal language is not better than informal language and vice versa, because you need to know them and use them in different situations. So, you need to think about what kind of language you should use. And like I said, this depends on situation and who you are talking to. When writing to a friend, you should use informal language. But if you're writing to a company, a text for school, or a person of authority, you should write with a formal tone. Let's look at informal language. These words and expressions are often shorter and easier than formal words and expressions. You use the informal language when you talk to people you know and people that you can be comfortable with and personal with. This is why you often don't use informal language when you're talking to strangers. The informal language also includes contractions and dialectal differences. And here are some examples. Man, fella, dude, guy, fellow, chap. Money, lot, dough, bread, lolly. I guess that you are not familiar with all of these words, and that is because we don't use them in some areas, and they are considered informal, so we don't use a lot of them in school. Informal language often includes a lot of slang. So how do you know if a word is a slang word or not? Well, if you look up a word in a dictionary, it will say if the word is slang or not. It is important to remember that slang is something that differs depending on where you are. But it also is important to remember that slang also changes over time. Okay, let's look at formal language. Formal language is what you use when you don't know the person you are talking to. But there are some exceptions for this. And for example, in more relaxed situations like a chat room or at a bar. It would be really weird if you walk up to a stranger at a bar and start speaking really formal language. That can be really intimidating. So I don't recommend that you do that. You need to use formal language in formal situations, of course. And one example of that is in meetings. When you're writing something in the academic world, it should be formal. You will find formal language in academic articles, reports, or business emails, lectures, presentations, and speeches. But remember, this can also differ depending on situation. Some speeches, for example, can be a bit informal, depending on the situation. I also want to say that I will say the same thing several times, but in different ways, just to make things clear. Let's look at formal language. It is used in academic and official content. It is often longer and more advanced. And here I mean expressions, sentences, etc. Formal language do not have colloquialism, and they don't have contractions. In academic texts, no person pronouns such as I or we are allowed. It should be neutral. Formal language is less personal, and that is why you will use it when you're talking to a stranger or someone that you're not really comfortable with. Formal language is often prepared, and the user often has more time to polish the language. For example, in academic text or speeches, then the user will have more time to use correct words and more advanced words. You should use it when writing or talking to a professional, You should also use it for academic purposes, like I've said before. Let's look at informal language. It is often used in everyday conversations, and I bet that you use informal language every day. Not the whole day, the entire day, but every day. These words and, no, not really words, but these expressions and sentences are often shorter and easier. And not like formal language, informal language has a lot of colloquialisms, and they contain a lot of contractions. Informal language is also more casual and more personal, and that is why you use it when you're talking to a friend, a family member, and a relative, and so on. It is often used when the user needs to express something fast, for example in chat rooms and everyday conversations. It would be really weird if you take a short pause, like I did for some seconds ago, if you're in a conversation. It would be really weird. So we often need to improvise and use some kind of words that we did not mention, that we did not mean to use. So, of course, this means that you need to go back and correct yourself a lot. Informal language, like I said, you should use it when writing or talking to a friend or a family member and so on. Let's go back to formal language. Formal language, well, the sentences are often longer and more complicated. Formal language is more correct and strict, and here you really need to use the correct form of words, which you don't have to do in informal language, but it is really important that you do it when you're talking with a formal tone. Formal language is considered more polite, and that is another reason why you are using it when you're talking to strangers or people that you're not really comfortable with. In formal language, you also use whole and complete sentences and phrases. You do not skip a word or two that you can do in informal language. Let's look at informal language. Informal language contains corrections and clarifications. And this is because the speaker talks too quickly sometimes and therefore needs to correct themselves or clarify what she or he means. Informal language is very improvised, and you can skip a word here or use the wrong form there. You need to follow rules, of course, but you can be a bit more playful when you're talking with an informal tone or writing. Informal language use a lot of hedges, which hedges are words that show hesitations. And examples of these words are well, a bit, kind of, and so on. Sometimes words and phrases are pronounced in a shortened and simplified way, like I'ma show you, what's up dog, and so on. Here are some examples of formal and informal words. We'll look at one at a time. So we start with the formal kind, request. And when you're talking to a friend and so on, you say ask for. So request, ask for. Next one, verify, which means check in informal language. Receive is the formal word for get. Provide is the formal word for give. Sufficient is the formal word for enough. And this demonstrate is the formal expression that means this shows that in informal language. Authorize is the formal word for order. And withdraw is the formal word for take away. So these were just some examples. And here are some more. But here I have used a little bit of Swedish. So let's look to the left and start with förkortning. And then I have written formellt ord, just so you can see what things mean. So, okay, look at the first one, cause. Well, that is a contraction of because. Ain't means is not. Gonna is going to. Wanna is want to. BTD means by the way. LOL, laugh out loud. Or laughing out loud. I've heard both. In the left corner, I have written 3 examples. One example of a text message, informal language and formal language. I thought it was kind of fun. I don't really want to read the first one, the text message, because I don't really know how. But I guess it's sort of, I'm going to the store. Is there anything you need? I don't use this kind of language, but I guess it is very popular today, especially by adolescents. But this means, in a formal language, I'm going to the store, what you need. And in formal language, you can say, I am going to the store. Is there anything you would like me to pick up for you? And if we look to the right, you see some slangord and betydelse. So let's look at them. Band means deprimerad. Chick means flicka, kvinna. Epic fail, gigantiskt misslyckande. Chillin, vara lugn och avslappnad. Gross, äcklig. Hardcore, intensiv. Hot, attraktiv. Lame, omodern eller dålig. My bad, det var mitt fel. Sick, väldigt bra. Sweet, väldigt bra. Tool, korkad person. So, this was a little bit about formal and informal language. I hope that you have learned something, and I hope that you feel more comfortable when reading text and deciding if the language is formal or informal. And let's practice, let's do this, and be more comfortable with it. So take care of yourself, and I will see you later in another video. Bye!